The package arrived on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, sitting on my porch like a secret I wasn't supposed to find. No delivery truck, no doorbell, no explanation, just a brown box with my name written in handwriting that made my chest tighten the moment I saw it. I hadn't seen that handwriting in 2 years, not since Sarah's funeral, not since everything fell apart. Inside my kitchen, the box sat under the harsh fluorescent light while I stared at it over my morning coffee. The writing was careful, deliberate, the way Michael used to write his homework assignments when he was 12, tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in concentration. But this wasn't homework, this was something else entirely. Why now? The cardboard gave way easily under my fingers, revealing layers of bubble wrap that crackled like a fire. Beneath that, nestled in custom-fitted foam, was a bottle that took my breath away. Macallan 25, the kind of single malt that costs more than most people's monthly rent. The amber liquid caught the morning light, swirling with gold and promises I couldn't afford to keep. There was no card. No Merry Christmas, Dad. No explanation for 2 years of silence broken by a gift that probably cost $3,000. Just 5 words written on a small piece of paper tucked beside the bottle. For your Christmas tradition, M. My hands were shaking as I held that note. Michael knew about the tradition, of course he did. Every Christmas Eve after Sarah died, I'd pour myself a small glass of whatever whiskey I had on hand, sit in my recliner, and toast the empty chair where she used to wrap presents. It was pathetic, maybe, but it was mine. Except I couldn't do it anymore. 3 months ago, Dr. Martinez had been very clear about that. After the heart episode, the one that left me on the hospital floor for 6 hours, wondering if this was how it ended, she'd given me a list of things that could kill me. Alcohol was near the top, right after stress and ignoring your medication. Michael had been there that day, sitting in the corner of the hospital room, scrolling through his phone, while the doctor explained how my heart was a ticking bomb that didn't appreciate whiskey anymore. He'd looked up once, caught my eye, then went back to his screen like he was reading something more interesting than his father's mortality. So why this? Why now? The bottle felt heavy in my hands, heavier than it should have. The weight of expectation, maybe, or guilt. Michael couldn't have known about the heart condition becoming worse, could he? We hadn't spoken since he walked out of Sarah's memorial service without a word, leaving me standing alone beside a casket full of I should have saids and if onlys. But this whiskey, it was perfect, too perfect. The exact brand Sarah had bought me for our last Christmas together, back when Michael still came home for holidays and the house didn't echo with silence. Back when Christmas meant something other than marking time until January. I set the bottle on the counter and stepped back, studying it like it might explode. Something about this felt wrong. Not the gift itself. Michael had money now, some tech job in Seattle that paid stupid amounts for doing things I didn't understand. But the timing, the silence before it, the way he'd written my name like he was afraid someone else might read it. Why send this when you know I can't drink it? My phone buzzed against the counter. Text message. Unknown number, but I knew who it was before I opened it. Hope you like the gift. Merry Christmas, Dad. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. 2 years of nothing and now this. A $3,000 olive branch wrapped in bubble wrap and tied with a bow of confusion. What was I supposed to say? Thank you. Where have you been? Why did you leave me alone at your mother's funeral? Instead, I typed, "It's beautiful, thank you." The response came back immediately. "You'll save it for Christmas Eve, right? Like always?" And there it was, the loop closing around me like a snare. He knew about the tradition. He knew about Christmas Eve. He knew I'd be sitting alone in that chair, probably crying into whatever cheap whiskey I could find at the corner store. Except I wouldn't be drinking anything this year. Couldn't. Doctor's orders. But how could I tell him that without explaining why we hadn't talked? Without admitting that I'd been hospitalized and he hadn't even known? without opening the door to conversations I wasn't ready to have. I looked at the bottle again, and for the first time since finding it on my porch, I smiled. Maybe I couldn't drink it, but I knew someone who'd appreciate it, someone who deserved something good for Christmas. Jim Patterson, Michael's father-in-law, lived 3 streets over and had been checking on me since Sarah died, bringing groceries, fixing my leaky faucet, pretending he just happened to be in the neighborhood when we both knew he drove 20 minutes out of his way. Jim was the kind of man who'd appreciate fine whiskey and the story behind it. I'll give it to Jim. Michael never has to know. But even as I made the decision, something nagged at me. That careful handwriting, the expensive gift, the pointed reference to tradition. Why did this feel less like a peace offering and more like a test? Already getting chills from that mysterious gift. If you want to see how this Christmas nightmare unfolds, hit that subscribe button right now and give this video a like. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Comment below. Do you think Michael's gift is innocent, or is something sinister already in motion? I love reading your predictions. Now let's find out why Frank's heart condition changes everything. The bottle sat on my kitchen counter like an accusation while I tried to remember the last time Michael and I had actually talked. Not texted, not exchanged pleasantries through his wife, Rebecca. Actually talked, father to son, the way we used to when he was growing up in this house. It had been Sarah's funeral. 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days ago. But who was counting? I could still see him standing at the back of the church, checking his phone, while Pastor Williams talked about Sarah's love for her family. Michael had flown in from Seattle that morning, still wearing his wrinkled travel clothes, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. He'd stayed through the service, through the burial, through the first hour of the reception at our house. Then he'd disappeared without saying goodbye. I'd found him loading his suitcase into a rental car. "That's it?" I'd asked him. "You're just leaving?" He'd looked at me with eyes that belonged to a stranger. "What do you want me to say, Dad?" "She's gone. Standing around eating casseroles isn't going to bring her back. She was your mother." "Yeah, well, you were her husband. Didn't stop you from working 70-hour weeks while she was getting sick, did it?" The words had hit harder than his fists ever could when he was a teenager, because they were true. Every late night at the accounting office, every weekend I'd spent buried in tax returns, while Sarah went to chemotherapy alone. He'd kept score of all of it, written it down somewhere in that methodical way of his, saving it up for the perfect moment to destroy me. Michael! But the car was already backing out of the driveway, just like that. 2 years of silence, born from 30 seconds of truth I couldn't argue with. The house had felt different after he left. Emptier somehow, though it had already been hollow since Sarah died. At least when she was alive, I could pretend that the distance between Michael and me was temporary, something we'd fix eventually. Sarah had always been the bridge between us, translating my awkwardness into something that looked like paternal love, softening my edges so Michael could find a way in. Without her, we were just 2 stubborn men who didn't know how to apologize. The heart attack had come 6 months later. I'd been working late again. Old habits die hard. When the pain hit my chest like a freight train. Mrs. Chen from next door found me on my office floor the next morning when I didn't pick up my newspaper. 6 hours lying there, wondering if this was how it ended. Alone, surrounded by tax forms and regret. Dr. Martinez had been blunt about it at the hospital. "You're 50 years old, Frank, but your heart thinks it's 70. The stress, the drinking, the isolation, it's all adding up. You want to see 55? Things have to change." The drinking had been the hardest part to give up. Not because I was an alcoholic. I wasn't. But because those quiet moments with a glass of whiskey were the only times I could still feel Sarah's presence. Like she was sitting across from me, rolling her eyes at whatever game was on TV, laughing at my terrible jokes. Without the whiskey, it was just me and the silence. I'd wanted to call Michael from the hospital, wanted to hear his voice, even if he hung up on me. But what would I have said? Hey son, I had a heart attack and realized I'm going to die alone unless we figure this out. Pride has a way of making cowards out of fathers, so I'd recovered alone. Learned to take pills that kept my heart beating regularly. Learned to eat vegetables that tasted like disappointment. Learned to sit in my chair on Christmas Eve with nothing but memories and the crushing weight of my own mistakes. Michael didn't know about any of it. Why would he? We'd both gotten very good at not talking to each other, but now this bottle, this perfect, expensive, impossible gift that showed up like a ghost from a Christmas I'd ruined 2 years ago. The last Christmas Eve. Sarah was alive. Michael had called to say he couldn't make it home. Some work thing? Some client dinner? Some excuse that sounded reasonable until you realized it was just another way of saying he'd rather be anywhere than in this house with his dying mother and his failure of a father. I'd poured myself a very large glass of Macallan that night, the exact same brand sitting on my counter now, and made a toast to the empty chair where my son should have been sitting. "Merry fucking Christmas, Michael," I'd said to the silence. Sarah had heard me from the bedroom. She'd been too weak to get up, but I'd heard her crying. Soft, disappointed tears that cut deeper than any words could have. She died 3 weeks later, and Michael had flown home for the funeral, but not for Christmas. Not for the last Christmas that mattered. How does he know? The question hit me like a slap. How did Michael know about my Christmas Eve tradition? I'd never told him about the whiskey, about the toasts to Sarah's memory, about the pathetic ritual I'd created to cope with losing everything that mattered. Rebecca, maybe. Had his wife said something? But Rebecca barely talked to me either. Hadn't since the funeral when I'd gotten drunk and made an ass of myself in front of her parents. Or had he been watching somehow? Keeping track of his old man from 3,000 miles away, collecting information like evidence for some case he was building against me? The thought made my chest tight in a way that had nothing to do with my heart condition. I picked up the bottle again, studying the label like it might reveal Michael's intentions. Macallan 25. 25 years aged in oak barrels, probably longer than Michael had been alive when he first called me Dad, back when things were simpler, before I'd learned how to disappoint everyone who mattered. Why this bottle? Why now? Maybe it was an olive branch. Maybe he'd gotten married, or gotten promoted, or just woken up one day missing the father he used to have before everything went to hell. Maybe this was his way of saying he was sorry without having to actually say the words. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Either way, I couldn't drink it. Dr. Martinez had been very clear about that. 1 glass of whiskey at my age, with my condition, could be the last drink I ever had, but Jim Patterson could appreciate it. Jim, who'd been more of a father to Rebecca than I'd ever been to Michael. Jim, who deserved something good for Christmas after 2 years of checking on a broken-down accountant who couldn't even keep his own son from disappearing. It felt right. It felt like justice. It felt like the perfect solution to a problem I didn't understand yet. By afternoon, the bottle had become an impossible weight on my conscience. Every time I walked past the kitchen, I could feel it sitting there, waiting, like it knew something I didn't. I tried watching TV, tried reading the newspaper, tried reorganizing my medicine cabinet for the 3rd time this month. Nothing worked. The bottle kept calling me back, demanding answers I didn't have. This is ridiculous. It was just whiskey. Expensive whiskey, yes, but not some mystical artifact. Michael had sent a gift. I couldn't use the gift. End of story. Except it wasn't that simple. Nothing with Michael ever was. The rational thing would be to call him, thank him properly, maybe even start the conversation we should have had 2 years ago. But every time I picked up my phone, I could hear his voice from the funeral. Didn't stop you from working 70-hour weeks while she was getting sick, did it? Some wounds don't heal just because you ignore them long enough. At 3 o'clock, I made the decision that would change everything. I'd give the bottle to Jim Patterson. Jim lived 6 houses down in the blue colonial with the perfectly manicured lawn and the American flag that he replaced every Veterans Day. 62 years old, retired electrician, the kind of neighbor who still believed in borrowing sugar and returning lawnmowers promptly. He'd been Rebecca's rock after her mother died, the steady presence that Michael had never learned to be. More importantly, Jim would appreciate this whiskey. He'd understand the craftsmanship, the history, the careful aging that went into every drop. He'd share it with friends, tell stories, make it part of celebrations that mattered. It wouldn't sit on a shelf gathering dust like a monument to my failures. The walk to Jim's house took exactly 4 minutes, but it felt like crossing a continent. The bottle was heavier than it should have been, wrapped in the same brown paper Michael had used, like I was carrying a secret I wasn't supposed to share. Jim answered the door in paint-splattered overalls, a Christmas song playing somewhere behind him. The smell of sugar cookies drifted out, mixing with the scent of pine from the massive Christmas tree visible in his living room. It smelled like the Christmases I used to have, back when my house was a home instead of a mausoleum. Frank! His face lit up the way it always did, genuine surprise mixed with warmth. What brings you by? Everything okay with the furnace? Everything's fine, Jim. Actually, I brought you something. I held out the package, suddenly uncertain. An early Christmas gift. His eyebrows shot up. Frank, you didn't need to. It's not from me, I said quickly. Well, it is now, I guess, but it was originally. It's complicated. Jim took the package with the careful reverence of a man who understood that some gifts carried more weight than others. He unwrapped it slowly, his eyes widening when he saw the label. Jesus Christ, Frank. This is... He turned the bottle carefully, reading the details like scripture. Macallan 25. I've only seen this in magazines. This must have cost more than my truck, I finished. Michael sent it for Christmas. Jim's expression shifted, understanding dawning. Michael was his son-in-law, but their relationship was complicated too. Michael had married Rebecca 3 years ago in a small ceremony that felt more like a business transaction than a celebration. Jim had tried to be welcoming, but Michael had a way of keeping people at arm's length, even family. And you're giving it to me because I can't drink it. The words came out easier than I'd expected. Doctor's orders, heart condition. And because you're the kind of man who'd know what to do with something this special. Jim nodded slowly, still cradling the bottle. This is incredibly generous, Frank. But are you sure? I mean, if Michael sent it specifically for you, what Michael doesn't know won't hurt him. I'm sure, I said. Besides, it's Christmas, season of giving and all that. We stood there for a moment. Two men who'd learned that life was too short and too complicated for simple gestures. Jim's gratitude was written across his face, mixed with something that looked like concern. You know, he said finally, Rebecca mentioned that Michael's been different lately. Distant, more than usual, I mean. Something cold moved through my chest. Different how? I don't know exactly. Rebecca doesn't talk about it much, you know how she is. But she's worried. Says he's been working odd hours, making phone calls he won't explain. She thinks he might be planning something. Planning something. The words hung in the air like smoke, carrying implications I didn't want to examine. Michael was always planning something. New business ventures, new investments, new ways to prove he was smarter than everyone else in the room. It was one of the things that had driven us apart, his need to be 3 steps ahead of everyone, including his father. I'm sure it's nothing, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Jim studied my face with the kind of attention that came from 40 years of reading electrical circuits and 30 years of reading people. You sure you're okay, Frank? You look a little pale. Fine, just tired. I forced a smile. Enjoy the whiskey, Jim. Merry Christmas. Walking back to my house, I felt lighter somehow. The weight of the bottle was gone, replaced by the satisfaction of doing something good for a man who deserved it. Jim would appreciate the gift. He'd make it special, meaningful, part of a Christmas that mattered. But Rebecca's words followed me home like shadows. He's been planning something. Back in my kitchen, staring at the empty space where the bottle had been, I tried to shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. The rational part of my brain insisted it was fine, a generous gesture, a problem solved. The irrational part, the part that had learned to listen to gut feelings after 50 years of being wrong about everything that mattered, whispered something else entirely. Why did this feel less like giving a gift and more like dodging a bullet? If you're already hooked by this Christmas mystery, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories like this one. And drop a comment below. What do you think Michael is really planning? I read every single comment and love hearing your theories. Now let's dive into what happens when Frank's generous act starts to unravel. Christmas Eve morning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear cold that made everything look like a postcard. I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months, maybe years. The decision about the whiskey had lifted a weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. Jim had texted me the night before. Can't stop thinking about that bottle. Going to save it for New Year's Eve. Invite the whole neighborhood. You better be there. It felt good. It felt right. For the first time since Sarah died, I'd done something that made someone genuinely happy. Not obligated happy, not polite happy, but the real thing. Jim's excitement had been infectious, like watching a kid on Christmas morning. I spent the morning cleaning house, not because anyone was coming over, but because it felt like the right thing to do. Vacuumed the living room, dusted Sarah's picture on the mantel, even put up the small Christmas tree I'd been avoiding for 2 years. Nothing elaborate, just a 3-foot Fraser fir with the ornaments Sarah had collected over the years. Each one told a story. Our first Christmas together, Michael's baby booties, vacation souvenirs from places that felt like another lifetime. By noon, I was actually humming White Christmas, Sarah's favorite. She used to play it on repeat from Thanksgiving until New Year's, driving Michael and me crazy with her off-key singing along. Now, the melody felt like a gift, a piece of her returning when I needed it most. The knock on my door came at 12:47. I know because I was watching the clock, counting down the hours until Jim's New Year's party, imagining the stories he'd tell about the whiskey, the friends who'd appreciate its quality. Jim stood on my porch looking uncomfortable, the Macallan bottle cradled in his arms like a sleeping child. "Frank, I need to talk to you about this." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just..." He stepped inside, unwrapped the bottle carefully, set it on my coffee table. "I called my brother last night. You remember Danny, right? He's a collector, knows more about whiskey than anyone I've ever met." I nodded, though something cold was spreading through my chest. I wanted to tell him about this beauty, maybe get some background on it. You know, age, distillery notes, that kind of thing. Jim ran his hand through his graying hair. Danny got real quiet when I described it, asked me where I got it. When I told him it was a gift from Michael, through you, he went dead silent. What did he say? He said this exact bottle, Macallan 25, this specific year, this label design, was recalled 6 months ago. Something about contamination during the aging process. Not all bottles, just a specific batch. Most were recovered, but a few made it to private collectors before the recall went public. The room felt like it was tilting. Contamination? Danny couldn't remember the details, but he said the company was real quiet about it. Paid top dollar to get the bottles back, no questions asked. The kind of recall that suggests lawyers were involved. I stared at the bottle, my perfect, generous gift, sitting innocently on my coffee table. The amber liquid looked the same, beautiful and promising, but now it felt different, dangerous. You think Michael knows? Jim's expression was carefully neutral. I think Michael's a smart man who knows a lot about a lot of things. I also think this bottle cost more money than most people spend on cars. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of implications settling between us. Outside, Christmas music played from someone's stereo, cheerful and oblivious. What are you thinking, Frank? I was thinking about Michael checking his phone during Sarah's funeral, about Rebecca saying he'd been planning something. About 2 years of silence broken by a gift I couldn't use, given to a man who'd done nothing but try to help me. I was thinking that maybe I'd dodged a bullet after all. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that we need to find out more about this recall. My phone rang at 3:17 p.m. on Christmas Eve, shattering the uneasy quiet that had settled over the house since Jim left. The caller ID showed a Seattle number I hadn't seen in 2 years. Michael. I stared at the screen for 4 rings before answering, my heart doing that irregular flutter Dr. Martinez had warned me about. Stress, she'd said. The enemy of damaged hearts everywhere. Hello, son. Dad. His voice was different somehow, lighter, almost cheerful. Merry Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas, Michael. A pause. In the background, I could hear what sounded like an office, keyboards clicking, muffled conversations, the hum of fluorescent lights. Odd place to be calling from on Christmas Eve. So, he continued, I wanted to check on you. Make sure you got my gift. I did. It's beautiful, Michael, really thoughtful. Good, good. I hoped you'd like it. Another pause. You haven't opened it yet, have you? The question hung in the air like smoke. There was something underneath it, a careful precision that made my chest tighten. Actually, because I was thinking, he interrupted, maybe you should save it. You know, for tonight, for your little Christmas Eve tradition, your little Christmas Eve tradition. The words hit like a slap. Not our tradition, or the family tradition. Your little tradition, like it was something pathetic, something to be mocked. How do you know about that, Michael? Silence. Long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Rebecca mentioned it, he said finally. Said you'd been struggling since Mom died, drinking alone on holidays. But Rebecca had never been to my house on Christmas Eve. She'd never seen me with a glass of whiskey, never witnessed the quiet toasts I made to Sarah's memory. How could she have mentioned something she'd never seen? Michael, I need to tell you something. About the whiskey. Dad, you sound stressed. Are you taking your medication? My blood went cold. What medication? Your heart medication. Rebecca mentioned you'd been having some health issues. Nothing serious, I hope. But I'd never told Rebecca about the heart attack. Never told anyone except Dr. Martinez and the paramedics. Jim knew because he'd driven me to follow-up appointments, but even he didn't know the details. Who told you about my heart condition? Another pause. Shorter this time, but loaded with something I couldn't identify. Dad, you're being paranoid. It's a small town. Word gets around. Besides, you're 50 years old. Heart problems aren't exactly shocking. He was deflecting. Michael had always been good at deflecting, turning conversations away from uncomfortable topics with the skill of a trained politician. But this felt different, calculated. I gave the whiskey to Jim, I said suddenly, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. The silence that followed was absolute, not just quiet, empty, like the line had gone dead. Except I could still hear the office sounds in the background. You what? His voice had changed. Gone was the false cheer, the casual tone. What remained was something sharp and dangerous. I gave it to Jim Patterson, your father-in-law. I can't drink anymore because of my heart, so I thought, you gave away my gift. Each word was precise, controlled. The gift I specifically chose for you. Michael, I didn't think. No, you didn't think. You never think, Dad. Just like with Mom. Just like with everything that actually matters. The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone for a long time, replaying the conversation in my head. The way he'd asked about opening the bottle. The way he'd known about my tradition, my medication, my condition. The way his voice had changed when I told him about Jim. How does he know these things? Outside, Christmas lights twinkled in neighbors' windows, casting colored shadows across my living room. Normal families doing normal things, wrapping presents, cooking dinner, being happy, while I sat in my chair, holding a phone that felt like evidence of something terrible. The Macallan bottle sat on my coffee table where Jim had left it, beautiful and menacing in the afternoon light, recalled for contamination, chosen specifically for me. given to a man who'd done nothing but try to help. I thought about calling Jim, warning him not to open it, but warning him about what? That my son might have sent me poisoned whiskey? That sounded insane, even in my own head. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. Please let me be wrong about this. Please let this be paranoia and stress and a father's guilty conscience. Please don't let my son be the monster I'm starting to think he is. But prayer, like everything else in my life, felt too little, too late. And somewhere in Seattle, in an office that shouldn't be open on Christmas Eve, Michael was probably making another phone call, planning his next move, planning something. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me, replaying Michael's phone call over and over until the words lost all meaning except the tone underneath them. You gave away my gift. Not disappointed, not hurt, angry, like I'd ruined something carefully planned. By 2 a.m., I'd given up pretending I could sleep. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty space where the Macallan had been. The morning felt 1,000 years away. I pulled out my laptop, an ancient thing that took 5 minutes to boot up, and started researching. Macallan 25 recalls contamination. The search results were sparse, buried in obscure industry newsletters and forum discussions among whiskey collectors. What I found made my hands shake. The recall had been voluntary and quiet. No FDA involvement, no public announcements, just a company notice to select retailers about a quality control issue affecting approximately 50 bottles from a specific production batch. The contamination wasn't bacterial or chemical. It was something called wood alcohol or methanol, a substance that occurred naturally in small amounts during the aging process, but had somehow concentrated to dangerous levels in these particular bottles. Methanol poisoning. I'd heard of it before, usually in stories about bootleggers during Prohibition. It caused blindness first, then organ failure, then death. The symptoms could take hours to manifest, giving the victim time to finish the bottle, maybe even enjoy it, before the poison did its work. 50 bottles, recalled 6 months ago. The timing made my stomach clench. 6 months ago was when I'd had my heart attack, when I'd been hospitalized, unconscious, vulnerable. When someone could have easily accessed my medical records if they knew where to look. Someone who worked in tech. Someone who understood systems, databases, privacy laws that could be bent if you knew how. I closed the laptop and walked to my front door, checking the locks twice. Then I walked through the house, looking for signs that someone had been inside. Nothing obvious, no broken windows, no disturbed furniture, but something felt different, off. In my bedroom, Sarah's jewelry box sat on the dresser where it had been for 2 years, untouched since the funeral. I lifted the lid and the familiar melody began to play, a tinny version of Für Elise that had annoyed me when she was alive and now sounded like a lullaby. The jewelry was exactly as I'd left it, but underneath the velvet compartment, I found something that made my breath catch. A small piece of paper, folded neatly, with handwriting I recognized. Sorry about Mom. She deserved better. It wasn't signed with Michael or Love Your Son, just M, like a business memo. When had he left this? How had he gotten in? I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? My son sent me expensive whiskey for Christmas and left a note in my dead wife's jewelry box. They'd think I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was, but the note felt real in my hands. Concrete proof that Michael had been in my house without permission, that he'd gone through Sarah's things, that whatever was happening wasn't just paranoia and grief. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Hope you're having a good Christmas Eve, Dad. Sleep well. I looked at the clock. 3:47 a.m. Who sends a text at 3:47 in the morning on Christmas Eve? Someone who knows you're awake. Someone who's watching. I went to every window in the house, peering through the curtains at the empty street. Nothing moved except bare tree branches in the wind. No strange cars, no shadowy figures, no obvious signs of surveillance. But the feeling remained. The certainty that I was being observed, studied, measured for something I didn't understand. I tried calling Jim, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. It was almost 4 a.m. on Christmas Day. Normal people were asleep, dreaming of presents and family gatherings and all the things that felt impossible now. Instead, I found myself dialing Dr. Martinez's emergency line. "This is Dr. Martinez. If this is a medical emergency, doctor, it's Frank Dalton. I'm not having a heart attack, but I need to ask you something." A pause. "Frank, it's 4 in the morning on Christmas Day. I know, I'm sorry, but this is important. My medical records, who has access to them?" "What kind of question is that?" "The kind that keeps me awake at night. Please, just tell me who can see information about my heart condition." She sighed. "Hospital staff directly involved in your care, your insurance company, any specialists I might refer you to, and family members if you've signed a release form." "I never signed a release form." "Frank, are you sure? Sometimes people sign things during admission when they're stressed or in pain. It's possible." I hung up. Family members. Michael could have signed something as my next of kin. Could have claimed medical necessity, power of attorney, any number of legal loopholes that would give him access to information I'd never intended to share. Information he could use to plan something terrible. The house felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I needed air, space, somewhere to think clearly. But stepping outside meant exposing myself, making myself a target for whatever Michael was planning, if he was planning anything. But deep down, in the place where fathers keep their most terrible suspicions about their children, I knew. This wasn't paranoia or stress or grief talking. This was survival instinct finally kicking in, 18 hours too late. This story is about to take a dark turn, and I guarantee you're not prepared for what's coming next. If you're loving this twisted family drama, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. Give this video a thumbs up if the tension is already getting to you, and comment below. Do you think Frank will figure out Michael's plan in time? Your engagement helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. Now brace yourself for the shocking revelation that changes everything. The call came at 6:23 a.m. on Christmas morning, jarring me awake from the first real sleep I'd managed in hours. I'd finally dozed off in my recliner around 5 a.m., the laptop still open on my chest, research about methanol poisoning glowing on the screen. "Frank?" A woman's voice, shaky and unfamiliar. "Yes? This is Carol Patterson, Jim's wife. I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital." The world tilted sideways. "What happened?" "Jim, he collapsed about an hour ago. We were opening presents and he fell over, started convulsing. The paramedics said it looks like some kind of poisoning." My phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. I scrambled to pick it up, my heart doing that irregular dance that Dr. Martinez had warned me about. "Frank, are you there?" "I'm here. Is he okay?" "They don't know yet. They're running tests, pumping his stomach. The doctors keep asking what he might have eaten or drunk that was unusual." Her voice broke. "The only thing different was that whiskey you gave him yesterday. He had a glass last night while we watched It's a Wonderful Life. Said he wanted to toast to good neighbors. One glass, that's all it took. Carol, I'm coming to the hospital right now." "Frank, what's going on?" "The doctors are asking questions I don't know how to answer. They want to know where the whiskey came from, who gave it to Jim, if there might be other bottles." "Tell them it came from my son," I said, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. "Tell them it might be contaminated. Tell them to test for methanol poisoning." Silence on the other end. Then, "Methanol? Frank, what aren't you telling me?" But I'd already hung up, grabbing my keys and jacket, my mind racing through implications I didn't want to face. Jim was in the hospital because of me, because I'd given him a gift meant to kill me, because I'd been generous with something that was supposed to be a murder weapon. Michael tried to kill me, and I gave the poison to an innocent man. The drive to St. Mary's took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Christmas morning in small-town America, empty streets, twinkling lights, families gathered around trees, opening presents that wouldn't try to kill them. Normal life continuing while mine fell apart at 60 miles per hour. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Carol Patterson sat in the waiting area, still in her Christmas pajamas, under a hospital coat someone had given her. She looked up when she saw me, and I could see the questions in her eyes, the dawning realization that this wasn't an accident. How is he? Stable for now. They've got him on dialysis to filter the poison out of his system. The doctor said if he'd drunk the whole bottle. She didn't finish the sentence. I sat down beside her, feeling like a fraud, a father whose son had tried to commit murder, and a friend who'd unknowingly delivered the weapon. Carol, I need to tell you something. About the whiskey, about Michael. Is this about the recall? I stopped mid-sentence. You know about the recall? The doctor mentioned it. Said they called the distillery when we told them about the whiskey, and the company immediately asked for the lot number. Apparently this bottle was part of a batch that was supposed to be destroyed 6 months ago. Supposed to be destroyed. But Michael had gotten one somehow. Bought it from a private collector maybe, or found it through some black market connection that his tech money could access. There's more, I said. I think Michael sent it specifically to hurt me. And when I gave it to Jim instead, Carol's face went white. You're saying your son tried to poison you? I'm saying my son sent me a bottle of whiskey he knew would kill me on a holiday when he knew I'd be alone and drinking. When I gave it to your husband instead, he became the target. A doctor appeared in scrubs, looking tired but cautiously optimistic. Mrs. Patterson, your husband is asking for you, and he'd like to see Mr. Dalton as well, if possible. We followed him through hallways that smelled like Christmas dinner and medical supplies, a surreal combination that made everything feel like a dream. Jim lay in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping track of vitals that shouldn't have needed tracking on Christmas morning, but his eyes were clear when he saw us. Angry, but clear. Frank, he said, his voice hoarse from the tubes they'd had down his throat. We need to talk. Jim, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I know you didn't. He struggled to sit up, Carol helping him adjust the pillows. But I've been thinking about this all morning between the vomiting and the dialysis. Your son didn't just send you poisoned whiskey by accident. No, he didn't. This was deliberate, planned. He wanted you dead, and when that didn't work out the way he expected, Jim looked at me with eyes that had seen combat in Vietnam and 40 years of electrical work. Eyes that knew the difference between accidents and intentions. He's going to try something else, isn't he? The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Because the answer was obvious to all of us. Michael had planned this carefully, precisely, with the methodical attention to detail that had made him successful in business. When Plan A failed, people like Michael always had a Plan B, and Plan B was going to be worse. I left the hospital with Jim's words echoing in my head like a death sentence. He's going to try something else, isn't he? The drive home felt different this time. Every car behind me might be Michael. Every shadow might hide something worse than poisoned whiskey. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see a rental car with Seattle plates following me through the empty Christmas streets. But it was my own driveway that delivered the real shock. My front door was standing open. Not broken, not kicked in, just open, like I'd left it that way when I rushed to the hospital. Except I knew I'd locked it, triple-checked it, the way I'd been checking everything since finding that note in Sarah's jewelry box. He's been here. I sat in my truck for 5 minutes, engine running, debating whether to call the police or drive straight back to the hospital. But this was my house, my life. If Michael wanted to play games, he'd picked the wrong father. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. No overturned furniture, no broken windows, no obvious signs of burglary. But I'd lived in this house for 23 years. I knew when things had been moved. The mail on my kitchen counter was stacked differently. The cushions on my couch had been rearranged. And my laptop, the ancient thing I'd used to research methanol poisoning, was closed when I was certain I'd left it open. What was he looking for? I opened the laptop and checked the browser history. Everything was still there. The searches for Macallan recalls, methanol poisoning symptoms, even the forum discussions about contaminated bottles. Michael had seen it all. He knew that I knew. That's when I found the envelope. It was sitting on my coffee table, propped against Sarah's picture like a Christmas card from hell. My name written in Michael's careful handwriting, the same script that had been on the whiskey package. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The letter was typed, impersonal as a business memo. Dad, by the time you read this, you'll understand that some problems require permanent solutions. I tried to make this easy for both of us, but you've always been stubborn about accepting help. The insurance money from your policy will ensure Rebecca and I can start our family without the financial stress your medical bills would create. Consider this a gift to everyone involved. The photo shows how simple this could have been. Now it's going to be more complicated. M. The photograph made my hands shake. It was me, sitting in my recliner last Christmas Eve, raising a glass of whiskey toward Sarah's empty chair. The angle suggested it had been taken through my living room window with a telephoto lens from someone parked across the street. He's been watching me for a year, but it was the timestamp that made my blood run cold. December 24th, 2023, 11:47 p.m. Michael had been here outside my house, photographing my private moments of grief while I thought I was alone with my memories. While I toasted my dead wife and mourned my lost son, he was documenting my loneliness like evidence in a murder trial. Evidence he could use to show I was depressed, isolated, prone to drinking alone. Evidence that would support a suicide narrative when they found my body. I sank into my chair, the same chair where Michael had photographed me, and tried to process what I was looking at. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of desperation. This was premeditated murder, planned over months, maybe years. The insurance money, of course. I had a life insurance policy through my old accounting firm, $500,000, enough to set up a comfortable life for a young couple starting a family. I'd never changed the beneficiary after Sarah died. Michael was still listed as my sole heir. How long has he been planning this? I thought about the timing again. The heart attack 6 months ago, followed immediately by the whiskey recall. Had Michael somehow triggered the heart attack? Stress, maybe, or some other method I couldn't imagine? Or had the heart attack been legitimate and Michael had simply seen an opportunity in my weakened condition? My phone buzzed. Text message from the same unknown number as last night. Found my present yet? Check your insurance policy. The Christmas clause expires at midnight. Christmas clause. I dug through my filing cabinet until I found the insurance paperwork, hands shaking as I flipped through pages of legal language I'd never bothered to read carefully. There, buried in Section 12C, was language about suicide exclusions. In the event of death by suicide, within 24 months of policy activation, benefits are void except when death occurs during holiday depression periods, as defined by clinical standards. Holiday depression periods. Christmas was the perfect time for a lonely widower to kill himself. Expected even. No one would question it. No one would investigate too deeply. Just a sad man who couldn't handle the holidays alone, who drank too much whiskey and made a permanent decision about a temporary problem. Except it wouldn't be whiskey anymore. It would be something else. Something that would look like suicide, but feel like murder. I was still staring at the insurance papers when I heard the sound that changed everything. A car door slamming in my driveway. He's back, Through my living room window, I watched Michael step out of a black sedan, not the rental car I'd expected, but something sleeker, more expensive. He moved with the casual confidence of a man who owned whatever situation he walked into. Designer jeans, leather jacket, the kind of understated wealth that whispered instead of shouted. He looked successful, happy, like a man about to solve his biggest problem. I had maybe 30 seconds before he reached my front door. 30 seconds to decide whether to run, hide, or face the son who'd been planning my murder for over a year. The insurance papers were still scattered across my coffee table, evidence of his plan, proof of his motives. I gathered them quickly, stuffing them into the manila folder where I kept Sarah's death certificate and other documents I never wanted to look at but couldn't throw away. Evidence. I need evidence. My phone. I could record this, create proof of what he was planning. But my hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped it twice trying to open the voice recording app. The knock came as I was fumbling with the settings. 3 sharp raps, confident and demanding. "Dad, I know you're in there. Your truck's in the driveway." His voice carried through the door like smoke, casual and friendly. The voice he'd used when he was 12 and wanted money for comic books, before everything went wrong between us. I walked to the door but didn't open it. "What do you want, Michael?" "To talk. It's Christmas, Dad. Time to put old grievances behind us." Old grievances. Like attempted murder was just a family disagreement we could resolve over coffee and small talk. "I'm not opening this door." A pause. Then laughter, genuine, delighted laughter that made my skin crawl. "You found my note." "I found a lot of things, including the fact that Jim Patterson is in the hospital fighting for his life because of your poisoned whiskey. That's unfortunate. But Jim was never supposed to be part of this equation. You changed the variables when you gave away my gift." Variables. Equation. He was talking about murder like it was a math problem he was trying to solve. "This is about the insurance money. This is about efficiency, Dad. You're 50 years old with a damaged heart, living alone, clearly depressed. The natural conclusion was always going to be the same. I just wanted to control the timeline." I pressed my back against the door, phone recording everything, hoping the microphone was sensitive enough to pick up his voice through the wood. "You've been watching me. For how long?" "Long enough to document your deteriorating mental state. The Christmas Eve drinking ritual, the conversations with Mum's picture, the way you've isolated yourself from everyone except Jim and his wife." Every word was a knife. He'd turned my grief into evidence, my love for Sarah into proof of instability. The heart attack. "Did you cause that too?" Another pause, longer this time. "Stress is a wonderful thing, Dad. So unpredictable, so hard to trace. Did you know that certain frequencies of sound, played at volumes just below conscious detection, can trigger cardiac episodes in people with pre-existing conditions?" Jesus Christ. The late-night phone calls with no one there, the mysterious car alarms going off outside your bedroom window. The construction equipment that kept starting up across the street at 3 a.m. His voice was getting closer to the door, like he was leaning against it. "Amazing what you can accomplish with technology and a little patience. You tortured me for months. I conditioned you for months, weakened your cardiovascular system through systematic stress, made you dependent on medication that would complicate any investigation into your eventual death." I could hear him moving around outside, probably checking windows, looking for another way in, the predator calculating his approach to cornered prey. "The insurance clause expires at midnight, Dad. After that, your death becomes significantly more complicated to arrange. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we're going to do this." "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Why do you hate me this much?" "Hate?" He sounded genuinely surprised. "This isn't about hate. This is about resource allocation. You're going to die within the next 5 years anyway. The doctors made that clear after your heart attack. Your medical bills will consume everything you've saved, leaving nothing for the next generation. This way, Rebecca and I can start our family with a proper foundation. Resource allocation. He'd reduced his father's life to a line item in a budget spreadsheet. What about love? What about family? What about them? Love doesn't pay for private schools or college tuition. Family doesn't buy houses in good neighborhoods or fund retirement accounts. Money does, and you're more valuable to me dead than alive. The truth hit like a physical blow. This wasn't about revenge for old wounds or anger over past mistakes. This was simple mathematics in Michael's mind, a cold calculation that my death was worth more than my life. I'm calling the police. No, Dad. You're not. The sound of breaking glass came from my bedroom. He'd found another way in. He's in the house. I ran for the back door, but it was already too late. Michael appeared in the hallway, no longer the successful businessman, but something else entirely. Something that wore my son's face, but had never learned what sons were supposed to feel for their fathers. In his hand was a syringe filled with clear liquid. Like I said, Dad, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And for the first time in 50 years, I understood what true terror felt like. The syringe in Michael's hand gleamed under my hallway light like a promise of death, but something had shifted in me during his cold confession. The terror was still there, but underneath it was something harder, angrier. This ends now. You made one mistake, Michael, I said, backing slowly toward my kitchen. Really? And what's that? You underestimated your old man. I lunged sideways into the kitchen, just as he rushed forward, the syringe missing my neck by inches. My hand found the cast-iron skillet hanging by the stove, Sarah's favorite, the one she'd used to make Sunday morning pancakes when Michael was small enough to believe his father was a hero. The skillet caught him across the temple with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a watermelon. He went down hard, the syringe skittering across my linoleum floor. Is he dead? For a moment I hoped he was. The thought should have horrified me, but all I felt was grim satisfaction. He was breathing, though, shallow, labored breaths that meant concussion, not death. I kicked the syringe under my refrigerator and grabbed my phone. The recording was still running. 43 minutes of Michael confessing to attempted murder, systematic torture, and premeditated patricide. Evidence. But evidence wouldn't help me if he woke up and finished what he'd started. I needed rope, handcuffs, something to keep him down until the police arrived. That's when I remembered the zip ties in my garage. Heavy-duty construction ties I'd bought to organize Sarah's Christmas decorations, but never used. They'd hold a grown man if I used enough of them. 5 minutes later, Michael was secured to my kitchen chair like a Christmas present from hell, arms behind his back, ankles bound to the chair legs. He was starting to stir, making soft groaning sounds that meant consciousness was returning. I sat across from him at my kitchen table and waited. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharp with the kind of clarity that came from realizing your situation had changed drastically. You hit me with a fucking skillet. Sarah's skillet. She would have done worse if she knew what you were planning. He tested the zip ties experimentally, then smiled when he realized they weren't budging. This is assault, Dad. Kidnapping. When the police get here, they're going to listen to 43 minutes of you confessing to attempted murder. I held up my phone, showing him the recording app still running. Resource allocation, remember? Variables and equations? Your words. The smile faded. For the first time since he'd walked through my door, Michael looked genuinely concerned. You can't prove any of that. It's just audio. I could claim coercion, duress. You could, but you won't. I leaned forward, letting him see something in my eyes that hadn't been there before. Because I'm not done collecting evidence yet. I walked to my junk drawer and pulled out the digital camera I'd bought to take pictures of Sarah's garden. Back when she was alive, and there were still beautiful things worth documenting. The memory card was full of pictures from better times, but there was enough space for what I needed now. Smile for the camera, Michael. Let's document that syringe you brought to kill your father. I photographed everything. The syringe under my refrigerator, the broken bedroom window he'd used to enter, the letter he'd left on my coffee table. The insurance papers with their damning holiday suicide clause. "You're making this worse for yourself," Michael said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "When I don't check in with Rebecca, Rebecca doesn't know, does she?" I stopped taking pictures and looked at him. She has no idea she married a sociopath who's been planning to murder his father for insurance money. Something flickered across his face. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first hint that his perfect plan wasn't as perfect as he'd thought. "Rebecca loves me. Rebecca loves the man she thinks you are, not the man who tortures his father for months and calls it resource allocation." I walked back to the kitchen table and sat down, keeping the camera between us like a weapon. "Here's what's going to happen, Michael. I'm going to call Detective Morrison at the sheriff's office. You remember him, right? He worked Mom's case when her jewelry went missing from the hospital. He's going to come here and arrest you for attempted murder. Then you're going to prison for a very long time. You don't understand. The insurance money stays with me, where it belongs. The only thing you're going to inherit is a cell block and a prison number." Michael stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Not anger or calculation or contempt, fear. "Dad, we can work this out. Family doesn't have to involve the police. We stopped being family the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive." I picked up my phone to call 911, but Michael's voice stopped me. "Wait, there's something you need to know about Mom." My finger hovered over the call button. "What about Mom?" "Her jewelry didn't just disappear from the hospital, Dad. I took it to pay for the research." "Research? What research?" "Into your heart condition, into stress-induced cardiac episodes, into insurance policies and suicide clauses." He was talking faster now, desperate to regain some kind of control. "I used Mom's jewelry to fund your murder," seemed poetic. The phone slipped from my hand again, but this time it wasn't shock. It was rage so pure and complete that it made my vision blur. He'd stolen from Sarah's dying body to finance my death, and that's when I knew I wasn't calling the police. Not yet. I set the phone down without calling 911 and walked to my liquor cabinet. The irony wasn't lost on me, reaching for whiskey when Michael's plan had revolved around my supposed drinking problem. But this wasn't about drowning sorrows anymore. This was about clarity. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into Sarah's favorite crystal tumbler, the one she'd inherited from her mother. Michael's eyes followed my every movement, calculating, trying to read where this was heading. "Having a drink to celebrate?" His voice carried forced bravado, but I could hear the uncertainty underneath. "Having a drink to think?" I took a sip, letting the burn settle in my chest. "See, Michael, you made one fundamental error in your calculations." "What's that?" "You assumed I loved you more than I hated what you've become." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. Michael's mask slipped completely, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "Dad, I'm still your son." "No, you're a stranger wearing my son's face." I took another sip, studying him like a specimen in a lab. The son I raised died somewhere along the way, and I never even noticed. Too busy working, too busy failing your mother, too busy being the father you clearly deserved. This isn't about you being a bad father, isn't it? I leaned back in my chair, the bourbon making everything clearer instead of cloudier. "You said it yourself at Mom's funeral. I worked 70-hour weeks while she was dying. I chose accounting ledgers over family dinners. I made you feel invisible." Michael's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in this entire nightmare, he looked uncertain. "But here's the thing, Michael. Bad fathers don't deserve to be murdered by their children. They deserve to live with their mistakes, carry their guilt, try to do better if they're given the chance." I was trying to solve a problem. You were trying to commit the perfect murder. I finished the bourbon and set the glass down harder than necessary. "And you know what? You almost did. The systematic stress to trigger my heart attack, the poisoned whiskey with built-in plausible deniability, the insurance clause that would pay double for holiday suicide. It was brilliant. Something like pride flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by wariness. Almost brilliant, I continued, but you forgot one crucial variable in your equation. What variable? Me. I stood up and walked around his chair, letting him feel vulnerable, exposed. This was how he'd made me feel for months, watched, analyzed, reduced to data points in his murder spreadsheet. You studied my routines, my habits, my weaknesses, but you never bothered to learn who I actually am underneath all that pathetic grief. I stopped in front of him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. I'm not just a broken-down accountant, Michael. I'm a 50-year-old man with nothing left to lose and every reason to make sure you never hurt anyone again. What are you talking about? I'm talking about justice, real justice, not the kind you get from courtrooms and plea bargains. I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up the syringe from where I'd retrieved it after kicking it under the refrigerator. The clear liquid inside caught the light, innocent-looking but deadly. What was in here, Michael? What were you planning to inject into your father? His face went white. Dad, put that down. Answer the question. It's insulin. Massive dose. Would have looked like diabetic shock, natural causes for a man with my medical history. Diabetic shock. I turned the syringe over in my hands, studying it like he'd studied my routines. Clever. Untraceable after a few hours, easily explained by stress and poor diet. Dad, please. Please what? Please forgive you for planning my murder. Please understand that you needed the insurance money more than I needed to be alive. I walked closer, holding the syringe where he could see it clearly. You know what I think, Michael? I think you're right about resource allocation. I think some problems do require permanent solutions. You wouldn't I? I let the question hang in the air, watching fear replace calculation in his eyes. You spent months convincing yourself that murder was just mathematics, that killing your father was a logical business decision. Why should killing you be any different? Michael was pulling against the zip ties now, panic overriding his earlier composure. This isn't you, Dad. You're not a killer. Neither were you once upon a time. But people change, Michael. Circumstances change us. Pain changes us. I held the syringe up to the light, watching the liquid move inside. Betrayal changes us most of all. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about everything. No, you're not. You're scared. There's a difference. I set the syringe down on the table in front of him, just close enough that he could see it, but far enough that he couldn't reach it even if his hands were free. Here's what's going to happen, Michael. You're going to tell me everything. Every detail of your plan. Every step you took, every moment you spent planning to murder the man who raised you. And then you're going to help me decide whether you deserve to live through this night. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. Just like you were when you walked into this house with that syringe. Michael stared at me, and for the first time I saw him clearly. Not as my son, not as the child I'd failed, but as what he'd chosen to become. A predator who'd picked the wrong prey. Start talking, Michael, and make it convincing. Your life depends on it. Michael talked for 27 minutes straight. Every detail, every calculation, every cold decision that had led to this moment. The insulin syringe contained enough to kill a horse. He'd calculated my body weight, factored in my heart medication, determined the exact dosage needed to simulate diabetic shock in a non-diabetic man. Clinical, thorough, monstrous. He'd been planning this for 18 months, not 12. Started researching the day after Sarah's funeral, when I'd broken down crying at the cemetery and he'd realized how unstable I'd become. The heart attack hadn't been just an opportunity, it had been the goal all along. The sound frequencies were transmitted through your smart TV, he explained, sweat dripping down his face despite the December cold. Subliminal audio designed to trigger stress responses. Every night for months, Dad. Every time you watched the news or tried to relax. My own television trying to kill me. What about Rebecca? Does she know? Rebecca thinks I'm building a software company. The life insurance money was supposed to be our startup capital. He looked up at me with something that might have been desperation. She doesn't know about any of this. She still thinks you're the grandfather our kids will need someday. Kids. He'd been planning to murder me before his children were even conceived, clearing the way for a more profitable future. "Show me your phone," I said. "What?" "Your phone. Show me the app you use to control the frequencies." Michael hesitated, then nodded toward his jacket pocket. I retrieved the phone. Latest iPhone, expensive case, the digital weapon of a modern killer. The app was buried in a folder labeled Work Tools. Stress Gen Pro, described as environmental audio manipulation for therapeutic applications. In the hands of someone like Michael, it had become a murder weapon more sophisticated than any gun. The target settings were all there. My home address, scheduled transmission times, frequency ranges calibrated for maximum cardiac stress. 18 months of systematic torture, documented in neat digital charts showing my declining health metrics. He'd graphed my approaching death like a stock portfolio. "This is everything?" I asked, scrolling through months of data. "Everything. Dad, I know this looks bad, but I can make this right. I can delete it all, disappear, never contact you again." "Make this right?" I set the phone down and picked up the syringe again. "Michael, you spent a year and a half slowly killing me with sound waves. You stole from your dying mother to finance your father's murder. You nearly killed an innocent man because I showed kindness instead of following your script. I'm sorry." "No, you're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught." I held the syringe up to the light again, watching Michael's eyes track the movement. He was breathing rapidly now, hyperventilating with terror. Good. Let him feel what I felt when he walked into this house planning to murder me. Here's what I've learned tonight, Michael. There are two kinds of people in this world. People who make mistakes and try to fix them, and people who make choices and refuse to own them. You've spent our entire relationship blaming me for your choices. Dad, please. I was a terrible father. I worked too much, loved too little, failed you and your mother in ways I can't even count. I moved closer, letting him see his death in my eyes. But I never tried to murder you for insurance money. The syringe felt heavy in my hand. One injection, and Michael's heart would stop within minutes, just like he'd planned for me. Perfect symmetry, perfect justice. He deserves this, but as I looked at him, really looked at him, I saw something that stopped me cold. I saw myself. Not the monster he'd become, but the fear underneath it. The desperate need for control that came from feeling powerless. The cold calculation that happened when you convinced yourself that love was a luxury you couldn't afford. I'd taught him this. Not intentionally, but through 18 years of choosing work over family, logic over emotion, success over connection. I'd raised him to believe that people were problems to be solved rather than relationships to be cherished. And now he was solving me. "You're right," I said finally, setting the syringe back on the table. "I'm not a killer." Relief flooded Michael's face, followed immediately by something that looked like triumph. He thought he'd won. Talked his way out of death through manipulation and false remorse. He still doesn't understand. But I'm not your father anymore either. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Frank Dalton at 1247 Maple Street. I need police and paramedics. I'm holding my son at gunpoint after he tried to murder me with a lethal injection. Sir, did you say murder? Attempted murder. I have him restrained and I have evidence. Send Detective Morrison if he's available. This is related to an ongoing case. I hung up and looked at Michael, who was staring at me with something between shock and rage. You're making a mistake, Dad. No, Michael, I'm fixing one. The sirens were already audible in the distance, growing louder by the second. The mistake was raising a son who could look his father in the eye and see nothing but a math problem to be solved. And that mistake ends tonight. Detective Morrison arrived with 3 patrol cars, their red and blue lights turning my quiet street into a crime scene. I watched through my window as neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the spectacle of Christmas night drama in suburban America. Mrs. Chen in her bathrobe, the Hendersons with their teenage kids, normal people witnessing the end of my family. Morrison knocked like a cop, firm, authoritative, but not aggressive. I'd called him specifically because he'd handled Sarah's missing jewelry case with competence and compassion. He'd believed me then, when everyone else thought I was a grieving husband imagining theft. I hoped he'd believe me now with something infinitely worse. "Frank, it's Detective Morrison. Open up." I unlocked the door but kept the chain on. "Jim, I need you to understand something before you come in. My son is zip-tied to a kitchen chair, and there's a syringe full of insulin on my table. He was trying to kill me with it." "Jesus, Frank, are you hurt?" "I'm fine. He's fine too, physically. But Jim, this is going to be the strangest case you've ever worked." Morrison was a 20-year veteran with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen enough to believe almost anything. He nodded slowly. "Let's take this step by step. First, I need you to move away from the door and keep your hands visible." I complied, backing into my living room. Morrison entered with 2 officers, weapons drawn but pointed down. Professional, careful, treating this like what it was. A domestic situation involving potential homicide. "Where is he?" "Kitchen. The evidence is on the table. His phone, the syringe, a letter he left explaining his plan, and I recorded everything." We moved through the house like a small parade, Morrison in front, me behind him, 2 officers covering our flanks. When we reached the kitchen, Michael looked up with an expression I'd never seen before, relief. "Officers, thank God you're here. My father has been holding me against my will. He hit me with a skillet and tied me up. I think he's having some kind of mental breakdown." Morrison studied the scene, Michael bound to the chair, the syringe on the table, my phone still recording. His experienced eyes took in details I'd stopped noticing: the broken bedroom window, the scattered insurance papers, the evidence of forced entry. "Mr. Dalton, can you tell me what happened here tonight?" "He broke into my house planning to murder me for life insurance money." I have 43 minutes of recorded confession, photographs of evidence, and documentation of systematic harassment going back 18 months. "Dad, that's not what happened. I came here to reconcile, to try to rebuild our relationship after Mom's death. When I knocked, he attacked me with a kitchen implement." "The skillet's over there," I interrupted, pointing to Sarah's cast iron pan still sitting on the counter. "His prints are on the syringe, and the insulin inside is enough to kill 3 people my size." Morrison held up a hand, stopping both of us. "I need everyone to calm down. Mr. Dalton Jr., you have the right to remain silent." "I'm not under arrest." Michael's voice rose, panic bleeding through his earlier composure. "I'm the victim here. My father is clearly having some kind of psychotic episode." "Actually," Morrison said, examining the syringe with a pen, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, breaking and entering, and whatever else I find when I review this evidence." He looked at me. "Frank, I need that recording." I stopped the recording app and handed over my phone. 43 minutes and 17 seconds of Michael's confession, his cold explanations, his casual discussion of resource allocation and permanent solutions. While Morrison listened to the first few minutes through earbuds, one of the officers, a young woman who looked barely old enough to vote, photographed everything with professional efficiency. The syringe, the broken window, Michael's phone, the insurance papers. "This StressGen app," Morrison said, looking up from Michael's phone. "What exactly does it do?" "Transmits sound frequencies designed to trigger cardiac episodes in people with heart conditions," I explained. "He's been using it to try to kill me slowly for 18 months. Morrison's expression darkened. "That's a new one. Tech-assisted attempted murder." He looked at Michael, who was staring at his feet. "Son, you want to explain why you have an app specifically designed to harm your father?" "I want a lawyer." "Smart choice." Morrison nodded to the officers. "Cut him loose from the chair, cuff him properly and get him to the station. I'll be there after I finish with Mr. Dalton Sr." As they lifted Michael from the chair, he looked at me one last time, not with anger or hatred, but with something that might have been disappointment. He's disappointed that I survived. "This isn't over, Dad." "Yes, it is," I said quietly. "It's been over for a long time. I just finally figured that out." They led him through my house and out to the patrol car, past neighbors who were recording everything on their phones. By tomorrow, the story would be all over social media. Local man arrested for trying to murder father on Christmas. Let them talk. The truth doesn't care about gossip. Morrison stayed behind, notebook out, ready to take my statement. The real work was just beginning. Evidence processing, forensic analysis, building a case that would put Michael away for decades. "Frank," he said gently, "this is going to be a long process. You understand that, right? Months of hearings, possibly a trial if he doesn't plead out. Your family's private business is going to become very public." I looked around my kitchen, Sarah's kitchen, where I'd almost been murdered by the child we'd raised together. "Jim, my family died tonight. What's left is just cleanup, and I'm finally ready to clean up the mess I helped create." 3 days after Christmas, I sat in St. Mary's Hospital cafeteria drinking coffee that tasted like regret and watching Jim Patterson eat Jell-O with the determination of a man grateful to be alive. "Still can't taste much," he said, spooning another bite of lime green gelatin. "Doctor says the methanol damaged some nerve endings. Could be permanent, could clear up in a few months. He's alive because I gave away a gift meant to kill me." The irony should have been funny, but nothing felt funny anymore. "I'm sorry, Jim, for all of it. Frank, we've been through this. You didn't know." He set down his spoon and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much in the past week. "Besides, I've got something to tell you about Rebecca." My stomach clenched. "What about her?" "She came by yesterday. First time since Michael got arrested." Jim's voice was careful, measuring each word. "She wanted to know if I thought you were lying about the whole thing. Still loyal to her husband. Still hoping this was all some misunderstanding." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that her husband tried to murder his father for insurance money, and when that didn't work, he nearly murdered me instead." Jim pushed the Jell-O aside. "She didn't take it well." "I imagine not. Frank, she's pregnant." The words hit like a physical blow. Michael was going to be a father. The insurance money he'd been planning to steal would have funded his child's future, college, house payments, all the normal dreams of normal families. Except his family would never be normal now. "How far along?" "About 3 months. She's been trying to tell Michael for weeks, but he kept saying he was too busy with work to talk." Jim's expression darkened. "Work? Jesus Christ, Frank. He was too busy planning your murder to find out he was going to be a father." I thought about the baby, Michael's child, my grandchild, growing up with a father in prison and a grandfather who'd put him there. Another generation damaged by choices they'd had no part in making. "She wants to see you." I don't think that's a good idea. She needs to understand, Frank. Right now, she's still hoping this is all some terrible mistake. That Michael will be released and they can go back to their normal life. There is no normal life after this. But I knew Jim was right. Rebecca deserved the truth, even if it destroyed the last illusions she had about the man she'd married. We drove to their apartment in Jim's truck, past the kind of suburban landscape that promised safety and stability. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, families building futures that didn't involve attempted murder. Rebecca answered the door, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Her eyes were red from crying, her face pale with the kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to process the unthinkable. "Frank." She stepped aside to let us in. "Thank you for coming." The apartment was exactly what I'd expected from Michael. Expensive furniture arranged with geometric precision, abstract art that looked costly but conveyed no emotion, everything clean and perfect and soulless. "How are you holding up?" I asked, though the answer was written across her face. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will all be a nightmare." She sat down heavily on their leather couch. The police, the lawyers, the reporters calling. It doesn't feel real. The reporters. I'd stopped reading the news after the third article calling it the Christmas murder plot. Social media was worse. Strangers dissecting my family's tragedy for entertainment, turning Michael's attempted murder into content for their feeds. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. Michael planned this for 18 months. He documented everything, recorded his methods, calculated dosages. This wasn't a moment of desperation or mental breakdown. This was premeditated murder. She flinched like I'd slapped her. But the Michael I know would never. He's kind, generous. The Michael you know is real, I said gently. But he's not the complete picture. People can compartmentalize, be loving husbands and cold-blooded killers. You're his father. How can you say that about your own son? Because I have to. Because someone needs to tell the truth, even when it destroys everything. I can say it because it's true, because I love you enough to warn you, and I love that baby enough to make sure you both stay safe. Her hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. The baby. Michael doesn't even know yet. And he won't. Not from me. But Rebecca, you need to think very carefully about whether you want him to know. Whether you want to be tied to him for the next 18 years through a child. Tears started flowing again. The kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from having your entire world collapse in a single week. Jim moved to comfort her, but I stayed where I was. Sometimes kindness looks like holding someone while they cry. Sometimes it looks like forcing them to face hard truths they'd rather avoid. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. Whatever keeps you and that baby safe, I said. Michael will be in prison for a very long time. You're 26 years old, with your whole life ahead of you. Don't spend it waiting for a man who tried to murder his father. And don't let my grandchild grow up thinking that murder is just another way to solve problems. We stayed for another hour, talking through practical things. Lawyers, divorce proceedings, the media attention that would follow her wherever she went. By the time we left, Rebecca looked exhausted, but determined. She'll be okay. The baby will be okay. They'll build a life without Michael's poison in it. As Jim drove me home, I realized something had shifted. The weight I'd been carrying for 2 years, the guilt over Sarah, the regret about Michael, the crushing loneliness of my empty house, had lifted. I'd finally stopped failing the people I loved. It wasn't redemption exactly. It was something simpler and more important. It was enough. 6 months later, I was installing new security cameras when Rebecca called to tell me she'd had the baby. A girl, she said, her voice tired but happy in a way I hadn't heard since before Michael's arrest. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy. I set down my screwdriver and sat on my front porch steps, looking out at the neighborhood that had watched my family implode on Christmas night. What's her name? Sarah. I hope that's okay. My throat closed. Sarah. Named for the grandmother she'd never meet, carrying the memory of the woman Michael had betrayed, even in death. It's perfect, I managed. How are you doing? Better. The divorce was finalized last week. Michael signed everything from prison. He didn't want to fight it. She paused. I think he knows it's over. Good. Maybe some part of him still has enough humanity left to recognize when he's lost. Michael had been sentenced to 25 years without parole. Attempted murder, aggravated assault, stalking, insurance fraud. The prosecutor had thrown everything at him and made it stick. The stress gen app had been particularly damning evidence, showing premeditation that even his expensive lawyers couldn't explain away. Frank, I wanted to ask you something about the baby. My chest tightened. What about her? I know this is complicated, but would you like to meet her? She's your granddaughter, regardless of everything else. My granddaughter. A baby who shares DNA with a man who tried to murder me, but also with Sarah, with the good parts of our family that somehow survived. I'd like that very much. Good. Because I was hoping maybe you could be her grandfather. The real kind. Not just in name, but in all the ways that matter. A second chance. The opportunity to be present for a child in ways I'd failed to be present for Michael. Rebecca, are you sure? Given everything, you're the one who saved us. You could have let Michael kill you and collect the insurance money. Instead, you fought back and exposed the truth. Sarah and I are alive because of your choices. After we hung up, I finished installing the camera system, motion sensors, doorbell cam, security lights, all the precautions of a man who'd learned that family could be the most dangerous enemy of all. But not this family, not this time. The trial had been a media circus, but the aftermath brought unexpected gifts. Dr. Martinez adjusted my medications and declared my heart stronger than it had been in years. Apparently, surviving attempted murder was good cardio. Jim Patterson recovered fully and started a support group for poisoning survivors. Detective Morrison got promoted after solving what the FBI called the most sophisticated domestic murder plot in state history. And I learned something important. I'm stronger than I thought. Not physical strength, I was still a 50-year-old accountant with a damaged heart. But the kind of strength that comes from facing your worst fears and discovering you can survive them. The kind that lets you sleep at night, knowing you chose truth over comfort, justice over family loyalty. My phone buzzed with a text from Jim. BBQ this weekend? Carol's making her famous potato salad. You should come. Yes, I typed back. I'll bring dessert, community, connection. The things Michael had taught me to see as weaknesses were actually what made life worth living. I walked through my house, checking locks and alarms with the practiced routine of a man who'd learned vigilance the hard way. But it wasn't paranoia anymore. It was self-respect, the understanding that my life had value, that the people who cared about me deserved my protection. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of apple juice and raised it towards Sarah's picture on the mantel. We did it, baby. We survived. The Christmas tradition continued, but the toast was different now. No longer mourning what I'd lost, but celebrating what I'd saved. Outside my window, the neighborhood settled into evening quiet. Normal families doing normal things, cooking dinner, helping with homework, building futures based on love instead of insurance calculations. I was part of that now, not just observing from the outside, but participating in the messy, complicated, beautiful work of staying alive and protecting the people who mattered. My granddaughter would grow up knowing her grandfather as a man who fought back when someone tried to hurt him, who chose difficult truths over comfortable lies, who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. She would know me as the man I'd become, not the one I'd been. As darkness fell, I activated the security system and settled into my chair with a book, something hopeful for once, about second chances and families that choose each other rather than destroy each other. Tomorrow, I would meet Sarah. Tomorrow, I would begin the work of being the grandfather I'd never learned to be a father. Tonight, I was simply a man who had survived his son's attempt to murder him and discovered that surviving wasn't the same as living. Now, I was ready to do both.